we are being hosted by Beat the GMAT. This is such a fantastic partnership with us, so we are very excited to talk about how you can stand out in this year's application process for the MBA. I'm going to take questions at the end of the presentation, but if I do monitor it while I'm speaking, so I actually might be able to answer things while we talk here. So feel free to start asking questions if you do have them, and try to make them applicable for everybody so that people know, can get the most out of this session as well. Great. So what we will start with is introductions. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my journey, talk about the company Stratus Prep and what we do, and then we'll launch into the meat of the presentation, which is really breaking down the competition, talking about how you should think about yourself in the process, and then really talk about how can you stand out in the applications process. There are many factors that go into the admissions decision, so you shouldn't think that there is a magic bullet for anybody, but if you can strengthen your profile and your work along all of these different factors, then you'll have a very strong shot at maximizing your success this season. I'll then talk a little bit about my favorite cases from the past year that I've seen, and I try to keep them as, past year examples so that I can really show you what people are looking at right now and what schools are looking for. After that, just conclude, talk a little bit about an exclusive offer just for the people from Beat the GMAT. Like I said, this is a great partnership, and we definitely want to make sure we're taking care of our partners and any clients that come from Beat the GMAT. So we'll talk about that, as well as then launch into Q&A. So a little bit about myself. My name is Salma. I actually started off as an engineer. That is my background. I was a mechanical engineer from Stanford, went directly into my master's program at MIT, where I worked and did a graduate thesis on space propulsion, so I truly am, I like to consider myself a former rocket scientist. After a couple years of work, I went into my business school program, which was at HBS. As the slide says, I started my career at Orbital Sciences Corporation outside of DC, designing satellites in the manufacturing and operations world. But very, very quickly, I came to understand one key thing about myself, which was I was far more interested in learning about the strategy, the way the company was growing, client-facing activities, much, much more than anything with my technical design work. And when I figured that out, I knew that my next step really was probably going into management and then ultimately into running companies. So I decided to apply for the MBA programs at that point. Luckily, thankfully, I went to HBS and had just the most incredible experience. And there I actually realized one other thing about myself, which was that it wasn't simply aerospace that I loved so much as an industry. It was simply problem solving. And I could apply that to anything that I did. So I used that opportunity with the MBA to jump into a different industry and a different function. A career switch is not something I would necessarily recommend to anybody, but it allowed me to jump into a different industry altogether, which was media and entertainment. I ended up at AOL working as their director of strategic planning for their member services organization, and then worked as the director of international business development, specifically in building their portal business in the Asia Pacific region. I then left to pursue something that I was absolutely passionate about, and I still am, which is the arts. And I joined Cinetic Theater down in DC as its managing director and COO, and was there for a few years, and that was really my startup experience. So it was had an amazing time doing all of these different things, had a life change, moved to New York, and thought very much about what did I truly want to do next. And for me, I had always worked with people and worked on applications for free, for friends, for direct reports, colleagues, family members, and I knew that that was a direction that I wanted to continue. So I actually joined Stratus, have successfully worked with clients from all over the world, and just this past year and this past season, my clients, got admitted to HBS, including the 2+2 program, Stanford, Wharton, Kellogg, and the list goes on. But it is something that I am truly passionate about. I love working with people and helping them achieve their professional goals as well as personal goals. And you'll see that while putting together your application, the personal side of it becomes very, very important. A little bit about Stratus Prep. Stratus Prep was founded 10 years ago by Sean O'Connor, and really his idea was to use all of his knowledge into a company first doing GMAT and LSAT test preparation, and then into admissions consulting. Sean also earned his JD MBA from Harvard. He was a Baker Scholar at HBS himself, and his approach to admissions consulting was exactly my approach too, in terms of how do you work with clients to really maximize their success. And through his leadership of the company, Stratus has developed a really wonderful methodology that is structured, but it is also customized to every client. And with that, we use that as the basis to really help our clients with, again, maximizing their success at MBA programs. On our MBA side, there's a couple other people who serve as our senior strategists on our team. So they are senior admissions personnel. Asha Banker and Shefali Agarwal both went to HBS. So we are an HBS senior team, I guess, but we have people who went to many of the top schools on our counseling roster. But Asha currently serves as alumni advisor to HBS, to the field program. She also has had a lot of experience in terms of admissions counseling throughout the years, but she's also had experience in finance at Goldman. She's worked in consulting in terms of innovation consulting and disruptive innovation. She is now also working in the education space, so she brings a lot of knowledge to the table around those sectors. Shefali, similarly, had worked with the admissions team at HBS while she was there, and has also worked on Wall Street, worked as an entrepreneur, and currently serves as our Executive Vice President of Strategy here at Stratus Prep. I wanted to bring that up and really talk about the team because we really do take a team-based approach to our methodology when we're working with clients. In terms of the GMAT side, because I said we had two sides to our MBA business, which is GMAT tutoring and admissions consulting, on the GMAT side, we really pride ourselves in having the very, very strong tutors who not only have scored highly on the GMAT, but also have teaching experience. And that teaching experience is the thing that we take very seriously and pride ourselves on. We look at tutoring as being the way to improve your score versus doing general test-taking methodology or curriculum sessions. We leave that to other people, and because we feel that people have the best improvements when they can work one-on-one with somebody. On the admissions counseling side, all of our counselors have graduated from a top program. Many of them have read for the admissions committees themselves and have had interviewing experience for those schools. All have coached applicants successfully for more than 2 years. And the key, really, is that we thoroughly develop the strategy and positioning for our applicants prior to even touching an application. That is extremely important. Without doing that strategy work and positioning work, you really can't attack the application pieces successfully, because what the applications themselves ask, they're asking for very specific things around goals and values and how you are a fit with those schools to which you're applying. If you can't really convey that in an application, it does become very general. And the key is, how do you differentiate yourself in a pool of thousands of applicants? The other piece of magic here is that we have a team-based approach, like I said. So clients work with a primary counselor as well as a secondary senior strategist who comes in at strategic points in the process so that they can essentially peer review what's going on and strengthen the application. Additionally, we have another secondary reader who reviews the essays so that you have a third eye on what's going on. And then at the end of the day, we do have a professional proofreader come in. So that is really us and what we do. We serve clients all over the world, and more than likely, if you are from a country and you're wondering, have we worked with somebody from that country that you are from? The answer is most likely yes. Over the past 10 years, we have worked with clients in over 50 countries and many of the states. All right, so in terms of getting into a top program, what does that take? And what should you really be focusing on and doing? Well, what I really want to get across is that it does take a significant amount of dedication to the process to really craft a compelling application. So you really have to make sure you set aside the time to maximize your GMAT score as much as you can. These are pieces within your control, right? You want to make sure you are strengthening every single point that you can possibly strengthen. Building relationships with your recommenders also takes time. Developing any essays or personal statements, that takes time. So recognize that you have to have dedication to be able to apply successfully to many of these programs. Completing an introspective process prior to the actual application work is essential. That is where a lot of the magic happens. You have to define who you are, you have to understand who you are, where you're coming from, what things in your history have shaped you, what are your landmark experiences, so that when you actually hit the ground running, working on the application, you have a clear sense of who you are, what you've done, and where you're going. And that's going to be key. And then third, you also need time, like I said, to build that profile to differentiate yourself. So what else could you be doing now to set you up for the best application possible? Once you understand where you are, who you are, where you're going, you absolutely have to spend the time researching the schools and understanding how to customize and tailor your messaging to that school. So think about it like this. You wouldn't give the same presentation to somebody who is a technical expert as you would give it to a CEO. They're just two different things. Schools are similar in that regard. You have to understand who your audience is and what they are interested in and what they need to see. And every school has a different personality. And then finally, having somebody who is an expert to help review, help guide, bounce ideas off of is very valuable. So even if you aren't working with an admissions consultant, you can work with somebody who is an objective outside eye who can provide you with guidance and an external eye to make sure that the tone is right, that it's clear, that there is enough specificity. These are all these things that are extremely valuable to crafting just the best application you can possibly craft. So recognize that it does take time. And the next thing to recognize is, who are you really competing against? So in terms of the pool of applicants, you are not competing with the entire pool of applicants to a specific school. You're competing against people who are in the similar profile to you, meaning women will not compete with men in the applications process. A female engineer, just using myself, a female engineer from the US, that's probably my pool. If I were in the most competitive pool, I would be an Indian male engineer. That is an extremely competitive pool, so it's very valuable to understand who you're competing against. You are not competing against, if you're an engineer, you're not competing against finance professionals. But if you're a finance professional, also recognize there are many people within that pool, so how can you differentiate yourself? And from a timing perspective, this is absolutely something to think about. If you are applying in round 1 of this year, you really do have to start your applications now if you haven't already. It takes time, it takes a lot of thinking, so now is the time to start. You do have time for round 2 if you want to start now as well. There's a lot more runway for round 2. And depending on the school, round 1 versus round 2 are pretty similar. For schools, however, with very small class sizes, that's probably not the case. Round one will be the best opportunity for you to apply because they simply haven't given away spots as yet. And when admissions committees are looking to build a diverse cohort of people, if they filled certain spots for the next round, they're going to look and see, well, what are the things that we are missing in our cohort? So if a school has a very small class size, such as Berkeley, Haas, although I've heard that they are increasing their class size this coming season, then give yourself enough time to dedicate yourself to applying to those schools who you think round one will be the better round for. And then for other schools, you might be able to delay it to round two. A strong candidate, though, in any round is a strong candidate. So don't think if you miss round one, you've missed out. That's simply not the case. You do need, though, the time to be able to click submit with a lot of confidence and know that you've done everything in your power to maximize your chances. All right, so the next thing that we're going to get into is really the meat here. 10 steps to standing out. Great. I was just quickly checking to see if there were any questions that I could answer right away. But there's nothing on what I have talked about so far. There are a couple questions that I will wait to answer. One is about reapplications, but we'll get to that. The first thing to stand out, obviously, is academic performance. The schools do look for people with high GPAs, but that doesn't mean that if you don't have a high GPA, there's nothing you can do about it. Certainly, you can't change your GPA. It is what it is. But recognize that you can take steps to mitigate a low GPA. That includes having a high GMAT score, potentially on the quant side, so that you can show that you are rigorous in your thinking and analytical. That could also mean creating an alternative transcript, so taking additional classes. But academic performance absolutely depends on what school you're talking about. At HBS and Stanford specifically, they do look for people with strong GPAs. At Wharton, they like to see a strong GMAT. So they are a little notorious for wanting to see a GMAT score on the quant side of 49 and above. And the majority of applicants that we've seen have had that, who have gotten into Wharton, but there's some who haven't. No, by no means is this an absolute number. It's not. But in general, they do want to see people who are very strong from a quantitative perspective. Solid work history. Absolutely, you have to show impact. What have you done that you have a measurable outcome that has had an impact and a great amount of scope? How can you build that if you don't already have it? Have you had a promotion recently that you can point to? Again, did you increase your scope? What are the new skills you're building through that? Are you an entrepreneur? Can you show examples of innovation? These are things that admissions committees absolutely look for. They want to see people with entrepreneurial mindsets or people who are innovative in some way and pushing the boundaries of thought. Are you a process innovator? You don't have to be in product development to be involved with innovation. It's simply, what are you doing that's new? Can you convey that? And if you currently don't have any examples around these things, use the time now to build this into your work. International and global experiences are absolutely very, very valuable in the applications process, but specifically they're valuable because programs are looking to create a cohort that is diverse and that is global and that thinks globally. And so when they share their experiences with one another, they can share experiences at work that is not only US based but is global. More and more cases at HBS, for example, are being written with a global understanding versus simply a US mindset. So anything such as, work experience in an international setting, study abroad programs, could also contribute to that. Service projects that you've done that are volunteer work, anything to that effect that is international can also count. If you don't have any international experience or don't have cross-cultural experience in terms of working with cross-cultural teams, see if you can get on a project. That'll give you some international exposure. The next thing is the admissions committees really do want to see a commitment to some type of extracurricular activity. And this is not simply fundraising. This is more about what are you doing from a leadership perspective? Can you show that you have an impact on that organization? Could you even demonstrate, as this says, strategic thinking? Right? So what are you doing to advance that organization and to help them? There was a quick question that came in. I'm just going to back up really quickly. Can you give an example of an international service project? Yes. So an international service project could mean, I had a client who was working with a foundation in India, but was US based. But they would travel there to really do a lot of the organizational work. So building strategy, working with their board of directors to set up the programs that they wanted to do. So that's one type of service project where you could be US based, but it might have an international component. And from an extracurricular activities perspective, you can also consider what are you doing at work that is above and beyond your role. How are you going above and beyond? What are you getting involved in that can demonstrate impact to that organization? Leadership is probably the number one thing that most MBA programs look for. So have you shown leadership in any areas at work, in athletics? Potentially it's the military. It could be serving on a nonprofit board. What are you doing where you have a vested interest in the organization in which you serve? And have you had areas in which you potentially even led from the middle or led from below? Those can be very powerful examples as well of leadership. It is not simply leading from above and managing projects, but it can also be how are you influencing organizations through the way you work and how you work. Short-term and long-term goals are extremely important because admissions committees want to know that you have some understanding of what you will be doing and that they are attainable and that yet they contribute to society, so they're far-reaching. They have to be clear and you have to be very specific. And we spend a lot of time working with our clients. We spend about a month, typically, just working on this piece. Because without it being differentiated and unique and having some sort of contribution, it becomes harder to show your fit with the schools. So that's why we spend a lot of time brainstorming this in a very structured way. From a recommendation standpoint, you need to start building relationships with people who can give you the strongest recommendation possible. There are so many people applying that the references have to know you very, very well. They have to believe and position you as the strongest amongst your peers, and they need to show the examples of how you are those things. So a couple examples are, are you very analytical? Can your recommender show that through an example? Are you savvy in your communications? Do you collaborate and work well with teams? How do you do these things? That's what's important. And it's more important that they are able to give those examples than their title. So if you're thinking, oh, maybe I'll just get the CEO or the managing director of my organization to write me a letter of recommendation because they went to that school, that's probably not the best letter of recommendation unless you've worked very closely with that person. That person absolutely can say you are the best amongst your peers and they have specific examples of your work. to show how you do those things and how you are differentiated from other people. So it's the very, very best recommendations are going to be the ones with whom you have the strongest relationships, regardless of their title. Looking at your resume, does it tell a story? Does it show a track record of results? Do you have the promotions that show qualitative evidence of increasing scope? Are there measurable results on that resume? You want to make sure that that resume, like I said, is consistent with the story you're telling, where you want to go, where you've been, and shows impact. So the very, very first thing to look at when you're evaluating a profile is your resume. You know, what are the key things that I'm missing? What can I do to strengthen every area? Then in terms of number 9, you have to have, once you know your goals, have filled out your, any gaps in your profile, you do have to know why you need that MBA now. Why isn't it next year? Why do you need it now? What is that clear reason that you absolutely need an MBA and an MBA from that particular school? So it's more than just saying you need the knowledge or the skills, but what truly is essential from that school for what you want to do. You have to make sure that that's conveyed properly. One person just quickly asked about the resume. Do you literally say I was promoted on the resume? No, but you'll show your different titles and you'll show the increasing scope. So when you're talking about, what is your position description under a specific title, then the new title, what is your position description under that title, and what are you responsible for, it should show an increase in responsibilities and scope. And finally, you're welcome. And finally, in terms of number 10, professional guidance. I was shocked when I saw this number, but it is a recent number from a survey that was conducted that said 57% of the students who apply to graduate school apply to school with an admissions consultant. When I saw that number, I thought, wow, this didn't really exist about 10, 15 years ago when I was going through the application process myself. But it just makes sense because in seeing the amount of students and candidates that are applying these days to programs, the competition is extremely intense. So people do want a trusted advisor, somebody they can bounce ideas off of, somebody who's independent so that they can really get a thorough analysis and an independent viewpoint on what they're submitting. So to me, it just goes to show the level of competition that people are experiencing right now. This slide is about our track record. We've had an amazing track record over the past 10 years, and the real key is very much about just making sure that we are maximizing our clients' success by giving them that one-on-one time with the consultant, whether it is the tutor or the consultant themselves, to talk about what their goals are, what they want to do, how can they connect those things to the program of their choice. Most of our clients are admitted to at least one school of their choice, and that is definitely the case when people are using us for 4 or more schools. So typically people will use our services to apply to 3 or 4 schools, but if they do apply to 4 or more, we are very thoughtful in our suggestions to them about, what's a good mix of schools to apply to, a good range, what is achievable, what makes sense, what is an absolute fit with your background and where you want to go and what you want to do. Because like I said, a lot of the schools have very, very different personalities. But not everybody is a fit for Stanford. Not everybody is a fit for Wharton. We have an incredible acceptance rate from our client base at Wharton, about 70% of our clients get accepted there. However, that means 30% don't, right? So we want to make sure that we are helping people understand, where they fit, where they lie, and how they can best maximize their chances and strengthen their applications based on all of the applications we've seen in the past. One thing that people also don't really recognize and think about when they're applying is merit-based scholarships. A lot of people tend to get those merit-based scholarships just on the basis of the strength of their application. They don't have to do anything else except submit an extremely compelling and targeted application to a school, which makes the school understand the value of that person to the school. So if the story is there, it's very compelling, if the school understands why you need to be there and why there is no other fit, then they are likely to give you a merit-based scholarship. And many of our clients have received those merit-based scholarships. And it's been unexpected, but yet incredible. And it's paid for our services, obviously, right? But yet it's also paid for their schooling. So this is something to consider when you are applying too, is how can you maximize your chances in getting admitted and with scholarship. So before I jump into Q&A, I want to go through a few case studies of clients from this past year. So this is a case study. This particular slide is US, and the next slide is international. So John and Jen both applied in the same year. John went to a top 50 undergrad, had a good GPA, 3.6, had 5 years of experience prior to matriculation, and a GMAT score that was 700, but the quant was high. John's specialty was actually in analytics, but yet he also had a very creative teaching, coaching type of brain as well. John was very successful and was admitted to MIT with scholarship. Jen went to a top 10 undergrad engineering program, but with a low GPA. However, she had a master's degree in which she had a high GPA. And she also had approximately the same number of years of work experience, but a lower GMAT score. And the quant was actually a 44. So comparatively, John had, a little bit better numbers. And what Jen had was, the strength in that master's degree to combat the undergrad GPA issue, as well as a background that was in technology and healthcare. So those things were very, very valuable and are valuable to schools, especially to schools in which engineers and scientists are perhaps not as common. Jen was admitted to both HBS and Wharton. So, and those were her absolute reach schools. She did not believe she could get in. But she worked very, very hard, was very diligent. We strengthened every single part of that application, brought out her key strengths, and she was admitted successfully. On the international side, I have Jose and Peter, and this is a case study also in having less work experience and having more work experience. So Jose didn't have a lot of work experience prior to matriculation, meaning, he had about 3 years of work experience when he started working with us, 4 years prior to matriculation. Was an international candidate, however, went to a US school for undergrad, had a good GPA, again had a high quant score, a quant of 48, received interviews at HBS, Stanford, and Wharton, so did extremely well. He also did extremely well at many other schools because we had a strategy in which, you have your stretches, you have your targets. And he was admitted to Stanford and Wharton at the end of the day. Peter, on the other hand, international candidate, went to an international university, had a strong GPA there, but he was very experienced. He graduated in the mid-2000s. So you still can get into top programs even if you did graduate a while ago, but you do have to show why it's a fit. Why now? Why do you need that MBA? Can't you just, the question, because you absolutely have to answer the question, why couldn't you just stay in your current organization and build your career from here. Why do you need that MBA? From a GMAT perspective, high quant score again, and the results were that Peter was admitted to Wharton, which was his #1 choice, and which he was actually a reapplicant. And he also then got a full ride at Duke, which was, again, unexpected and incredibly valuable. He actually chose Wharton over Duke, but it was a very, very tough decision. So going back to the reapplicant question that I had from earlier, let me see if I can quickly find it. All right, I'm going to be a reapplicant. My current organization is very stagnant and not promoting or really giving anyone the option to take charge. So how do we show our application has improved? I'm excelling in my extracurriculars and took on a VP position. I plan to raise my GRE score. You're doing all the right things. So it's really about making sure you're strengthening every single piece in the application that you can possibly strengthen. Take a look at your goals. Are they unique? Are they differentiated? Look at your recommendation letters as well. Are you using the same people, or are you using new recommenders potentially who can talk more about the work you're doing now than the work you did a while ago? Potentially one of the new recommenders could be from your extracurricular activity in which you've strengthened your leadership. Is there anything else you can be doing to show organizational impact at work if there is no ability for promotion? So can you do something where you are impacting them in some way that's measurable? And again, raising your GMAT score or a GRE is definitely something to kind of put aside, have to mitigate any fears that somebody has about your quantitative abilities. The quantitative score on the GMAT or the GRE is very, very useful in that regard, especially if you don't come from an analytical background. You do need to show a strong quantitative score. So here are some of the key takeaways before I get to more of these questions. But the first one is, do recognize the difficulty of getting in. It is hard. There's a lot of competition, but you need to simply be prepared. Know how much time it takes, be dedicated, understand your target, do your research, understand what the admissions committees are looking for and who they are, not necessarily who the admissions committee are, but who that school is. What is their mission? What do they focus on? What types of people do they attract? Where do they place people after they graduate? And then using an expert such as ourselves who've been through this process thousands of times with people from all over the world is valuable. Because we have seen so many things, we can help you differentiate yourself and distinguish yourself from others. So really, if you do partner with us, with Stratus, on your test prep and applications, you can absolutely depend on us to maximize your chances of admission to your top schools, to your schools of your choice. And one thing I forgot, which was the exclusive partnership offer that we have for the folks from Beat the GMAT. So the first 75 attendees, so this is a call to action, so if you do have a computer handy, and obviously you are watching this on the computer, but if you can take action, that would be great. I think we're going to send this out on the chat as well in terms of the link, but the first 75 attendees who fill out the form at stratusprep.com, Beat GMAT partnership, will receive, one, a complimentary consultation with one of our senior admissions folks, and more importantly, a 10% savings on our services until the end of this month with the code BTG10. And that's very valuable because we're actually raising our prices in July. So if you are ready to work with us and ready to work now, then absolutely sign up. And if you want the consultation but are also thinking about signing up but not sure, but you do want the consultation, reach out. You know, like I said, the first 75 attendees who fill out the form will get the consultation. And references are always available, so you can count on us to be as open and transparent with you. So the Q&A, so let's see what we have here. All right. What is considered a high GPA? For example, would a 3.75 be considered a high GPA? Yes, anything, it does depend on what program you went to in terms of what school, what your major was. However, anything, above a 3.5 is considered a solid GPA, and I would say if you're in the 3.75 and above range, that would be the high GPA range. Do they accept strong GRE scores instead of GMATs? Yes. People, more and more places are accepting GRE scores versus GMATs. You do need to check with a specific school, but a strong GRE score is equivalent to a strong GMAT score in the sense that you would need to be able to score the GMAT equivalent of whatever their average is. So I'll give you an example. If a school is approximately, on average, has a GMAT score of 710, you probably need to be in the quant range of 165 and above, and a verbal range of around 155 and above. That's just to make the 710 approximate. The place to look at it would be GMAC has a conversion tool called the GRE to GMAT conversion tool, and you can go online and actually check to see what your GMAT score is in terms of a GMAT. And that's how a lot of schools will look at it. Well, they'll do the conversion. What could we do as an IT professional, as there are many of them and not much to differentiate them, and they don't get much time for working for social work or doing extracurricular activities? That is a good question. That is a very, very difficult pool to be in. But you have to do whatever you can to differentiate yourself and to show your leadership. So if it is within a work context, how are you showing that you are a leader in that context? Are you doing things to improve your organization? I know it takes time to do extracurricular activities, but at the same time, you do need to make time. And if you do want to differentiate yourself in that pool, you have to try to do everything you can possibly do to help differentiate yourself. And if it is an extracurricular activity that you are passionate about, that you have a personal connection to, you will naturally make the time. So I would never advise somebody to do something like join a board or a junior board of some organization that they have no interest in, because they will not be motivated nor effective. You have to be motivated. You have to want to do what you're doing because there's a reason for you to do it. You're passionate about it. There's some sort of motivation there. And if you don't have that motivation, you won't excel, and you need to excel. So find something that you are passionate about personally and see how you can get involved in it. All right, the next one would be, let's see, international experience. I'm in an automotive firm, so unlike IT or consulting, we really don't work long periods abroad. But I do work with an Italian design house for product development. It's a 2-day trip once in 3 months. Does that count? Absolutely. What it really is about, talking about the touch points that you have that are international or cross-cultural in some way. One applicant that we had last year didn't have any international experience at all and talked about how one of the things they were interested in the MBA program was that it was going to expose them to global experiences, something that they really truly wanted and had very specific reasons as to why. And they also pointed to their fascination with meeting people from all over the world and working with people from all over the world in their division that they were working in. but yet they'd never had the experience to travel or truly work abroad. So really just focus on trying to show how that has, increased broadened your global mindset, I would say. Do working for international clients count as international experience? Again, yes. Like, it's really about how can you work with other people cross-culturally. So that's what I would focus on. All right, so the next one, can previous managers who no longer work for the organization I work for be a recommender? Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things where you do have to explain on the optional section in the application where they're currently working or why you chose them, or that they were a previous manager at that particular organization but they're working for somebody else. But if they know you extremely well and it's somebody who would absolutely have your back and be able to say that you are the top person they've worked with, feel free to use them as a recommender, as long as it wasn't so long ago that it's no longer relevant. Admissions committees want to understand how you have grown and have changed, but it still should be relevant to who you are today. How important is it to make the connection between your current job and industry and your short-term or long-term goals? And how can you do that if you plan to completely change your career? That's a difficult question, because in some cases completely changing a career can work. In other cases it's a difficult story to tell. So you really have to have a truly compelling reason why you're going to change your career and what's motivating you to do that now. If there is no compelling reason, then it would be much better to talk about how you're going to transition from where you are today into something else that might be in the same industry, but maybe it's a different function. So it doesn't sound like a complete switch, and it is achievable. Making a career switch happen is extremely difficult realistically. When I did it myself, it did take me, and I graduated from HBS, right? It took me 9 months to find a position. That's a long time. And it is something the admissions committees are thinking about too when they're looking at their classes. Is that person recruitable? Can we get them placed? How valuable are they when they leave here? Question on results-driven resume. If showing increase in scope and responsibilities gets covered under qualitative evidence, what goes under quantitative evidence? So it's really about the numbers then, right? So what, if you were doing a process improvement job, by what percentage did you increase productivity or turnaround time, whatever the metric is, right? So give the hard numbers and give the results. That's what I mean by quantitative evidence. All right, so this is a very specific question, but I'm going to answer it because there's a takeaway here for everybody. For an Indian male candidate, is a GMAT 710 for a CA and CISA with internal audit experience for 5 years good for schools such as Tuck, Darden, Ross, Duke, UNC, Booth, and Kellogg? First, the Indian male candidate pool is very, very competitive, so really trying to maximize your GMAT score will be in your best interest. Having said that, the next thing you should ask is, well, that is my experience base, but what are my goals? And do my goals fit with those schools? So from a numbers perspective, having a GMAT of a 710 is probably on the low side in general for some of these schools, right? For Booth, for Kellogg, potentially Duke. Ross looks at the GMAT very, very closely. But, from do you fit from a goals perspective, what do you want to do in your career? That's the real question you need to ask yourself as well. Because all those schools have very, very different programs and different personalities. So you'd have to understand what that is. And I would say that this is a follow-up question from the same person, that Tuck and Darden provided them with feedback to score 730 and 750 respectively, and I would follow their advice. You know, that is what they're seeing. The Indian male pool is just extremely competitive, and when, depending on the client, you know, I'm really encouraging people to try to just maximize from that pool, maximize the GMAT as best as they possibly can. Do you need to apply in round one if you have a low GPA? No. In fact, I would say you would apply to the round in which your entire package is most compelling. So do everything you can to strengthen every single part of that application, and when you're ready, that's the time to apply. For an international student, do you have a different acceptance rate in a top business school? I think the question is specifically about Stratus and Stratus's rate with international candidates. I don't have the breakout between our international student body in terms of international candidates and clients versus domestic clients, but in general, with an international student, depending on from which country they're coming from, what sector they're coming from, will make a recommendation around which schools to apply to as well as how many. And certainly if you are in the most competitive pool, which is the Indian male engineer or IT pool, then most of those clients, either with us or independently and working with us on a few schools and doing the rest themselves, they'll apply to around 8 schools in the year. In my opinion, is having a recommendation from an extracurricular weaker than a professional recommendation? Not necessarily. It really depends on how you're positioning yourself again. You know, what are your goals? What do you want to do? How do those recommenders fit into that overall picture? What qualities are they talking about that could be different and unique and compelling versus what a previous supervisor might say? So you have to look at it all as a complete package versus as individual pieces. Do we consult for non-US programs such as IESC and INSEAD? Yes, we do. We do. And INSEAD is one school that a lot of our clients are applying to and that we're successful with. Not as many people apply to IESE, but we have people who have, obviously. But certainly INSEAD and LBS would be the 2 schools that are on the stretch side that people generally like our help with. And then finally, I don't have much time left. I think I have time for one more question. So let me just figure out which one could be. All right. Would it be a wrong approach to make a job switch for a better salary, though I might not be able to show much with short work experience in my CV with the round 1 approaching? If you are making a job switch right now, you really have to get the committees to understand why you're doing that, first of all. And then second, if you're making the switch, can you get enough time in that role to show, the impact that you've had, right? Because what's going to happen is that you make the switch, but you're only going to be in that role for a year. So what are you going to be doing in this next year that's going to be valuable to us from a school perspective? How is it helping you get to your goals, achieve your goals? You need to answer that question. The second part is if you apply in round 1, just having switched into a new role, then you don't get any time to show any measurable results. Neither can you get a recommendation from. from somebody in that new role. So think very hard about whether round 1 is the right round, or maybe it makes more sense to wait until round 2. But it absolutely depends on who you are, what your history is, what the rationale was for moving into a new role. But it might be better positioned in round 2. Well, great. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating on the call today. Again, the first 75 attendees who fill out the form with us at Stratus Prep will get the free consultation with one of our senior experts so that you can really talk about anything that I didn't get to today. I'm going to just check to see if it's been sent out. Yep, I think, yeah, great. So the link has been sent out, so you all can go ahead and start signing up. But thank you guys so much, and thank you to Beat the GMAT. Without your partnership, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.